Have you ever wondered why the same texts have controlled the consciousness of billions of people for thousands of years? Not hundreds of years, not decades, but millennia. No corporation, no empire, no constitution has lasted that long. We are accustomed to calling the Bible and the Koran sacred scriptures, revelations, spiritual food. But what if we are making a fundamental classification error? What if we are looking at the instruction manual for a highly complex mechanism and seeing poetry? We decided to conduct an experiment that might seem blasphemous to a believer and absurd to an atheist. We stripped these books of their sacred status. We removed the mysticism, removed the smell of incense, and the sound of the adhan. We loaded millions of lines of text, the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Koran, into our artificial intelligence analytical system, Logos 7. We set the system a single task: analyze these texts not as literature, but as information code, as an algorithm, as an operating system. The results generated by Logos 7 force us to reconsider the entire history of human civilization. The system discovered that we are dealing not with disparate religious teachings, but with a single, sequentially updated software suite for humanity. This is not a metaphor. It is a technical fact confirmed by structural data analysis. Welcome to the first chapter of our investigation. Today, we will deconstruct the architecture of faith. Let's start with basic concepts. What is an operating system? It is a set of instructions that allows a chaotic set of hardware to work as a unified whole. Without an operating system, a computer is just a pile of silicon and plastic. Without a social operating system, humanity is a pack of primates restricted by Dunbar's number, capable of maintaining connections with a maximum of 150 individuals. To create a civilization, to build cities and armies, we needed a protocol uniting millions of strangers. We needed code. Logos 7 began its analysis with the oldest layers of data. Before the advent of Abrahamic religions, the world ran on what could be called the spaghetti code of paganism. Thousands of gods, local cults, a lack of a unified standard. It was a fragmented network where every tribal server ran on its own unique protocols, incompatible with its neighbors. This stalled data exchange, trade, and expansion. The efficiency of such a system tended towards zero. Humanity required an upgrade, global unification. And so, roughly 3,000 years ago, what Logos 7 classified as version 1.0 entered the scene. We know it as the Old Testament, or the Torah. Analyzing the structure of the Old Testament, the system's algorithms isolated a rigid binary framework. It was a revolutionary breakthrough for its time. Instead of the chaos of multiple gods, the concept of a single administrator is introduced. One God, one server, one source of truth. This colossally reduced the load on user cognitive abilities. You no longer need to negotiate with the river spirit, the mountain spirit, and the ancestor spirit. There is one vertical of power. However, Logos 7 points to the specific architecture of this version. Version 1.0 was, in programmer speak, proprietary software. It was intended for specific hardware, for one people. The system identified a massive number of if-then commands in the text regulating the minutest aspects of existence, from diet to hygiene. 613 commandments are not just religious rules. They are detailed instructions for the technical maintenance of biorobots in the aggressive environment of the Middle East. But version 1.0 had a significant flaw revealed by our AI, the scalability problem. To install this operating system, one had to be born into a specific tribe. Installation occurred at the genetic level. This ensured high stability and protection against hacking, but made global distribution impossible. The code was reliable, but local. The system worked, but it could not take over the world. The world needed a patch, an update that would preserve the core of monotheism but remove installation restrictions for new users. And here, we move to the moment that changed the course of history, the appearance of the New Testament. Logos 7 identifies this as the release of version 2.0. Analysis of the semantic core of the Gospel shows a radical interface change. If version 1.0 operated on the language of law and fear, external limiters, version 2.0 switched to the language of conscience and love, internal limiters. This is a brilliant engineering solution. Instead of assigning an overseer with a stone to every user, the system installs an internal observer. The concept of sin transforms. Now, sin is not just an action, but a thought. Logos 7 notes that the New Testament introduced the principle of cloud access. One no longer needs to be a descendant of Abraham by blood. It is enough to accept the license agreement, baptism. This made the system viral. It became cross-platform. It could be installed on a Roman, a Greek, a Scythian, or a slave. The network bandwidth grew millions of times over. However, version 2.0 revealed a vulnerability calculated by the Logos 7 algorithms. The high level of freedom and emphasis on a personal relationship with the administrator led to constant forks, schisms, and heresies. The code was too flexible. The text interpreter, the user, had too many access rights. This threatens system instability in the long term. When everyone interprets the truth in their own way, the unified network begins to disintegrate. It is at this moment, in the 7th century AD, that the third, final iteration of the Abrahamic code appears, the Koran. Logos 7 classifies it as version 3.0. This is an amazing synthesis. Analysis shows that the architects of this version took into account the errors of previous releases. The Quran returns the structural rigidity of version 1.0, law, Sharia, clear behavioral rules, but retains the viral potential and universality of version 2.0. Anyone can become a Muslim. Logos 7 draws attention to a unique code protection feature in the Quran. The text is declared the direct word of God, uncreated and immutable. The prohibition on changing even a single letter, the canonization of the original language, Arabic, as the only true carrier of the code. These are mechanisms of protection against unauthorized updates. In version 2.0, translations and interpretations diluted the meaning. In version 3.0, the system core is encrypted and write protected. It is interesting to observe how the AI visualizes the update timeline. We see the clear logic of a developer. First, a prototype is created on a small data set, the people of Israel. Debugging the harsh laws of survival takes place. Then, an open beta version with a simplified interface is released, Christianity, for maximum market reach and territorial capture. And finally, a corporate version with enhanced security and discipline is released, Islam, to retain and structure captured resources. But what does all this mean for us? Logos 7 draws a shocking conclusion. These books never contradicted each other in their essence. The conflicts we see on the surface, religious wars, disputes over dogma, are user conflicts, not developer conflicts. At the code level, these three texts are parts of a single mega-project. They are sequential stages of installing civilizational software. The system conducted a comparative analysis of key modules across all three versions, and here is what it found. Identical functional blocks are present in all three versions. Module, identification, definition of friend or foe, module law, regulation of property relations, module, nutrition, sanitary standards to prevent epidemics, module, reproduction, rigid control over sexuality and family structure. From the perspective of Logos 7, these are not questions of morality. These are system configuration parameters for optimizing population survival. Let's delve into the details of the version 1.0 analysis. The Old Testament. The system highlights the book of Leviticus. For the modern reader, it is a boring list of rules. Don't eat that, don't touch this, wash like this. But for artificial intelligence, it is a pure algorithm of biological defense. In the absence of antibiotics and microscopes, these religious prohibitions were the only barrier between life and death from infections. The ban on pork, the ban on mixing meat and dairy, the rules for isolating lepers. This is a medical reference book disguised as divine will. Why disguised? Because an ancient user would not understand the phrase bacterial contamination. But he perfectly understood the phrase, "It is an abomination before the Lord." The code was adapted to the user's education level. Now look at version 2.0, the New Testament. Logos 7 records a vector shift from survival of the body to survival of society. The main threat to the Roman Empire and subsequent centuries was not so much microbes as social stratification and hatred. The algorithm, love thy neighbor, is a tool for dampening social entropy. It is a mechanism preventing the self-destruction of overpopulated cities. Forgiveness, instead of revenge, breaks the endless cycles of blood feuds that could last for centuries and bleed the population dry. This was social engineering of the highest order. And finally, version 3.0, the Koran. Here, Logos 7 sees a return to total regulation, 5 mandatory prayers a day. This is not just spiritual practice. It is a mechanism for societal synchronization. Imagine 1 billion computers synchronizing their clocks and checking the server connection 5 times a day. This creates an incredibly powerful collective consciousness. The sense of unity of the Ummah, the community of believers, is achieved through these rhythmic, repetitive algorithms. This is army discipline embedded in civilian daily life. But who wrote this code? The artificial intelligence, devoid of religious awe, asks uncomfortable questions. Were the prophets the genius programmers of their time? Or were they merely transmitters receiving a signal from a more advanced source? Logos 7 does not yet give an answer regarding the source, but it clearly sees the handwriting. Stylometric analysis shows that despite the difference in languages and eras, the logical structure of the core remains unchanged. The system's goals, order, reproduction, expansion, subordination of the individual to group interests, remain constants for 3,000 years. We often think that religion is about the afterlife, about what comes after. But the analysis by Logos 7 shows that 90% of the code in these books is dedicated to what happens here and now. These are instructions for managing earthly resources. This is the charter of the guard service of planet Earth. Look at the world map. Civilization boundaries still coincide with the installation boundaries of these operating system versions. The Western world runs on a modified kernel of version 2.0, the Middle East on version 3.0, and the conflicts we observe today are largely conflicts of protocol incompatibility. Errors when trying to run an application written for one system in the environment of another. The AI modeled an alternative history. What would have happened if these texts hadn't appeared? The simulation run by Logos 7 paints a grim picture. Without these unifying protocols, humanity would likely have remained stuck at the level of tribal warfare. Globalization would have been impossible. Science, which paradoxically grew out of monasteries and madrasas, would have had no base from which to launch. Yes, these systems brought much blood. The installation process was often accompanied by formatting the hard drive, destroying dissenters. But from the perspective of cold efficiency, they fulfilled their task. They gathered humanity into large clusters. But today, we stand on the threshold of a new era, the era of digital immortality and artificial intelligence. And the main question posed by Logos 7 is this: is this code relevant today? We are still running on software whose kernel was written in the Bronze Age. We are trying to manage a space civilization using instructions for shepherds and farmers. Is this not the cause of modern society's system crashes? Is our cognitive dissonance not the result of our hardware changing, while the software remains the same? In the following chapters, We will break down each module of this system separately. We will learn exactly how these books program our behavior. We will look into the Hell module and see the mechanics of fear. We will dissect the Heaven module and understand the reward algorithm. We will crack the priesthood access codes and the system's gender settings. But before we go further, Logos 7 invites you to reflect on one fact. Right now, as you listen to these words, algorithms embedded by these texts are running in your brain, even if you consider yourself an atheist. Our concepts of good and evil, justice, marriage, the value of human life. All of this is the legacy of the code of versions 1, 2, and 3. We are all carriers of this information. We are part of this network. The question is only whether we are users of the system or its programmable objects. And is it possible to exit this matrix without crashing civilization entirely? Get ready. In the next chapter, we activate protocol behavior. Logos 7 has already completed the analysis of the 10 Commandments and Sharia law through the prism of game theory. You will learn why pork, alcohol, and interest-bearing loans were actually banned, and what mathematics stands behind morality. The truth we uncover will be cold, calculating, and absolutely logical. Imagine a busy highway with thousands of cars racing at high speed. They have no lanes, no traffic lights, no speed limit signs, and no right-of-way rules. Each car is a human being with their own desires, ambitions, and aggression. What will happen to the system in 5 minutes? Correct. Total collapse. A pile of burning metal. The system will destroy itself. To prevent this, we need a set of rules, a traffic protocol. In the first chapter, we established that sacred scriptures are the operating system of civilization. Today, we descend deeper to the code level and dissect protocol behavior. We loaded the complete set of Old Testament laws, all gospel commandments, and Sharia norms from the Koran and Sunnah into our analytical system, Logos 7. We task the AI with analyzing these rules not from the perspective of morality or spirituality, but from the perspective of mathematics, specifically through the prism of game theory. The results generated by Logos 7 are striking in their cynicism and precision. It turns out that what we call sin is, for the system, simply a code error leading to a system crash. And what we call righteousness is the optimal survival strategy for a group under conditions of limited resources. Let's start with the foundation. Game theory is a branch of mathematics that studies conflict resolution between rational agents. Logos 7 modeled the behavior of ancient tribes. In the wild, without police or courts, the most profitable short-term strategy for an individual is selfishness. Stealing food from a neighbor is more profitable than gathering it yourself. Killing a competitor is more profitable than negotiating. But here a paradox comes into play, known as the prisoner's dilemma. If everyone chooses the selfish strategy, kill and steal, society instantly disappears. The population resets to zero. To escape this deadlock, the system needed a hard patch, an external limiter. And so a tablet appears with the command, "Do not kill, do not steal, do not covet your neighbor's wife." Logos 7 identifies the 10 Commandments not as God's whim, but as the implementation of an algorithm known in game theory as tit-for-tat with forgiveness, or a strategy of reciprocal altruism. This is the only mathematical model that allows a group to grow numerically. The ban on killing within the group reduces internal losses. The ban on theft reduces transaction costs. You don't need to spend resources guarding your property from tribesmen. You can direct those resources toward external expansion. But that is the base. The most interesting part begins where modern people see only strange, archaic prohibitions. Why does God forbid eating pork? Why can't one wear clothes of mixed fabrics? What is the need for complex washing rituals? Atheists laugh at this. Believers look for sacred meaning. Logos 7 found in this an instruction manual for biological security. Let's analyze the famous ban on pork, present in both Judaism, version 1.0, and Islam, version 3.0. The system's algorithms analyze the climatic and epidemiological data of the Middle East 3,000 years ago. The pig is a unique animal. It is omnivorous, like humans. This means it is an ideal incubator for the same parasites that are dangerous to people. Trichinosis is a deadly disease caused by microscopic worms. In a hot climate, without refrigerators and the ability for deep thermal processing, pork turned into a biological weapon. An outbreak of trichinosis could wipe out a tribe in a week. But there is a second layer identified by Logos 7, economic. The pig is a competitor to humans for food resources. Sheep and camels eat grass and thorns that humans cannot eat. They convert useless cellulose into meat and milk. Pigs do not eat grass. They need grain. The same grain that humans need for bread. In conditions of desert and water scarcity, raising pigs is a crime against the food security of the community. The code had to forbid this bug. But how to explain parasites and calorie conversion to an illiterate nomad? You can't. Therefore, the concept of haram or non-kosher is introduced. It is an abomination. Fear of God's wrath works more effectively than a biology lecture. Let's move on. Alcohol. Here we see an interesting system update dynamic. In version 1.0 and 2.0, Bible, wine is permitted and even sacralized. But in version 3.0, Koran, a complete, total ban is introduced. Why did the developer change the code? Logos 7 compared social contexts. Christianity spread in the Mediterranean, where wine culture had existed for millennia, and wine mixed with water was a way to sanitize bad water. Islam, however, originated in the Arabian desert. Heat plus alcohol leads to instant dehydration. But the main thing is not that. The main thing is aggression. Arab tribes before Islam were in a state of permanent war of all against all. Alcohol was a catalyst for violence, removing the last inhibitions. The system modeled the development of the Arab Caliphate with permitted alcohol. Simulation result: army disintegration, internal strife, impossibility of effective expansion. The alcohol ban in Islam is not a question of morality. It is a question of military camp discipline. It is a patch that increases unit combat capability and management system stability. Now let's touch on a topic relevant today more than ever. Usury, loan interest, riba. The Bible condemns it. The Koran forbids it categorically, declaring war on those who lend money at interest. Why do sacred texts hate bankers so much? Logos 7 conducted an economic analysis. Usury is a mechanism where money makes money without producing a real product. This creates exponential debt growth. In ancient agrarian societies, the economy did not grow exponentially. Yields were linear. When debt grows faster than the real economy, a moment arrives when a significant part of the population falls into debt slavery. This leads to a colossal social divide. The rich become ultra-rich, the poor lose everything, including personal freedom. For the operating system of society, this is a critical error: processor overheating. Such stratification inevitably leads to revolution, rebellion, and the destruction of the state. The ban on usury is a fuse. It is a built-in protection mechanism against financial bubbles that could collapse the entire civilization. Logos 7 shows that Islamic banking, or biblical jubilee years, when all debts were forgiven, are tools for factory resetting the economy to prevent systemic collapse. And what about the seemingly strange petty rules? For example, ritual washing before prayer. In Islam, wudu 5 times a day. In Judaism, washing hands, mikvah. We return to medicine. Logos 7 reminds us, we are talking about times when people did not know about bacteria. They didn't know that dirty hands are a path to dysentery and cholera. If a prophet said, wash your hands before eating so you don't get sick, people might forget, ignore, get lazy. But when this requirement is hard-coded into the protocol of access to God, it becomes mandatory. 5 prayers a day in Islam mean that a person is guaranteed to wash their face, hands, feet, and clear their nose 5 times a day. In conditions of desert dust and unsanitary conditions, this is a powerful preventive measure. It reduces the viral load on the population. Statistical analysis by Logos 7 shows a direct correlation between strict observance of religious hygiene rituals and community survival during medieval plague epidemics. Those who followed the instruction died less often. Survivors considered it a miracle. The system considers it a pattern. Also, the system drew attention to the weekend protocol, Shabbat in Judaism, Sunday in Christianity, Friday in Islam. From the perspective of exploiting human resources, it would seem more profitable to work 7 days a week. More labor, more product. But Logos 7 refutes this. A human is not a machine. Without a recovery period, productivity drops, errors accumulate, and injury rates and stress levels rise. The introduction of a mandatory sacred day of rest is a brilliant solution in labor resource management. It is a forced disk defragmentation. The ban on work under penalty of death, as it was in the Old Testament, guaranteed that no greedy slave owner would drive his people to death. It ensured the long-term operability of bio-robots. Moreover, collective prayer on this day worked as team building, synchronization of goals and values for the entire community. But the deepest layer of protocol behavior, exposed by Logos 7, concerns aggression management. In the Old Testament, we see the principle of talion, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. To modern people, this seems cruel, but the system points to the context. Before this principle, the rule of blood vengeance without limits applied. For one eye, I will kill your whole family. The law, eye for an eye, was an act of humanism and violence limitation. It said, reciprocal aggression must be strictly equal to the damage inflicted. No more. This prevented conflict escalation. In the New Testament, an upgrade is introduced. Turn the other cheek. This is not weakness. This is an attempt to break the chain of violence completely. This is a transition to a new level of social game complexity, where cooperation is placed above retribution. So, what do we see when we put all the data together? Sacred books don't just tell us be good. They provide clear, mathematically verified algorithms for, first, preventing epidemics, diet, hygiene. Second, preventing economic collapse, ban on usury. Third, preventing social chaos, ban on murder, theft, adultery. Fourth, optimizing labor productivity, day of rest. Logos 7 draws an unambiguous conclusion. Compliance with these norms gave a competitive advantage to those nations that accepted this firmware. They became healthier, richer, more united, and more numerous than their pagan neighbors living without system code. It was natural selection, enhanced by the artificial intelligence of sacred texts. But here a logical question arises. The code is perfect. The rules are logical. They work for the benefit of the group. But how to force millions of people to accept these rules? After all, it is human nature to violate prohibitions. It is human nature to be lazy, greedy, and seek pleasure. How to force a selfish primate to give up pork, wine, casual sex, and easy profit? For this, the code needs a distribution and implementation mechanism. It needs a viral agent that will hack the protection of individual consciousness and write these rules into the subcortex. In the next chapter, we will dissect one of the most frightening and effective mechanisms of these books, the replication virus. We will learn why the phrase "go and teach all nations" is a command for self-copying the virus. We will analyze jihad and missionary work not as spiritual feats, but as aggressive marketing and the capture of new information carriers. Logos 7 has already compared the behavior of early Christian communities and Islamic conquests with the behavior of computer worms in a global network. The similarity is 99%. Imagine an organism that has no body of its own. It consists of no cells, has no DNA, no blood, and no flesh. But it is alive. It feeds. It grows. It fights for territory. And most importantly, it reproduces. Its habitat is not forests and oceans, but the human brain. Its food is our mental resources, our time, and our energy. In biology, we call such organisms viruses. In computer science, computer viruses or worms. In culturology, memes. But Logos 7 classified sacred texts as the most complex, resilient, and aggressive form of information virus in the history of the universe. Welcome to the third chapter of our investigation. Today we will dissect the replication virus. We will understand why religions did not remain local cave cults, but took over the planet. We will analyze the mechanisms of missionary work and jihad not as acts of faith, but as algorithms for code self-copying. Let's start by defining the goal of any virus. A flu virus or HIV has no consciousness, no malice. It has only one command hard-coded into its RNA: copy itself into as many cells as possible. If the virus kills the host too quickly, it dies itself. If it is not contagious, it disappears. The ideal virus is one that forces the host to actively spread the infection, while keeping it alive long enough to infect others. Logos 7 scanned the texts of the New Testament and the Koran for commands responsible for propagation. In programming, this is called a recursion function, and the system discovered that these books contain powerful directives that turn every user into a relay station. Look at the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28, verse 19. The famous Great Commission. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. For a believer, this is a call to save souls. For artificial intelligence, this is a line of code. Go to all. Copy self. It is a command that forbids the system from being self-contained. You cannot just believe quietly in a corner. You are obligated to go and install this software on others. If you do not do this, you are a defective carrier. In the Quran, this algorithm is written even more strictly. The concept of dawah, invitation, and the concept of jihad, struggle on the path of Allah, are instruments of aggressive expansion. Logos 7 notes that version 3.0, Islam, includes not only network marketing, preaching, but also forceful server capture, territorial conquests. The code explicitly states, religion must dominate. But how do you force a person to become a virus carrier? After all, it is dangerous. Missionaries were killed. They died of diseases in foreign lands. They suffered hardships. From the point of view of individual biological survival, missionary work is absurd. Why spend your resources on strangers? Here, Logos 7 identifies a brilliant mechanism for hacking the brain's reward system. The virus overwrites the host's priorities. In nature, there is a parasitic fungus called cordyceps. It infects an ant, grows into its nervous system, and forces the ant to do strange things. The ant does not look for food, does not protect the colony. It climbs to the highest branch, clamps its jaws onto a leaf, and dies. A mushroom sprouts from its head and sprays spores all over the forest, infecting new ants. The ant sacrificed itself for the reproduction of the fungus. Analysis of the biographies of Christian martyrs of the early centuries and Muslim shaheeds reveals an identical behavior pattern. Logos 7 calls this control hijacking. The idea, virus, becomes more important than the life of the carrier. The texts promise the carrier an infinite reward, paradise, for helping to copy the code. Save another, and you will save yourself. This creates an infinite chain reaction. Let's look at the distribution mechanics of version 2.0, Christianity in the Roman Empire. This is a classic example of a computer worm exploiting system vulnerabilities. Roman society was hierarchical, cruel, and unjust. Millions of slaves, women, and the poor were excluded from the privilege system. These were unsecured network nodes. The Christian virus attacked precisely them. It offered them status. You are not slaves, you are children of God. It offered them a social support network. Logos 7 modeled the spread. The virus went bottom up. By infecting the lower strata, it created a huge base of carriers. The elite ignored the threat, considering it a superstition of the rabble. But when the number of infected nodes reached critical mass, about 10 to 15% of the population, the virus made a jump to the administrator level. Emperor Constantine accepted Christianity. The system was completely reflashed. From an underground sect, Christianity turned into the state operating system. It was a brilliant Trojan horse strategy. Version 3.0, Islam, used a different tactic. Logos 7 calls it brute force, or the method of crude force combined with economic incentives. In the 7th century, Arabia was on the periphery of the world. Islam united disparate tribes into a single cluster, the Ummah. And this cluster began external expansion. But the virus was smarter than just convert or die. The Koran introduced a tax, jizya. If you are not a Muslim, you pay money. If you accept Islam, the tax is cancelled, or becomes zakat, which goes to the needs of one's own. This created powerful economic pressure. Being uninfected became unprofitable. The system pushed users toward a voluntary update installation. Analysis of the speed of Islam's spread in the 7th and 8th centuries shows phenomenal numbers. In 100 years, this code captured territories from Spain to India. No army, no idea in history moved with such speed before the advent of the internet. Another important aspect highlighted by Logos 7 is protection against uninstallation. A good virus must be able to protect itself from antiviruses. The sacred texts contain the strictest code integrity protection protocols. In Islam, apostasy, leaving the religion, was traditionally punishable by death. In medieval Christianity, by the Inquisition's pyre. Why such cruelty? From the perspective of information theory, this is quarantine. A node that deleted the virus and began broadcasting the signal, "The system is false," poses a deadly threat to the entire network. It can cause a cascade recovery, abandonment of faith. Therefore, the infected network physically destroys the cured node. This is the defensive reaction of the collective meme organism. Logos 7 also analyzed the role of women in virus replication. We will analyze this in detail in the 9th chapter, but it is important to note one point here. The virus is transmitted not only horizontally, from missionary to native, but also vertically, from mother to child. A child is born with a clean hard drive. They have no critical thinking. If the operating system of faith is installed before the age of 7, it is written into the basic sectors of the brain. Deleting it in adulthood is incredibly difficult. This is why texts regulate interfaith marriages so strictly. In Islam, a Muslim man can marry a Christian woman. The children will be Muslims. But a Muslim woman cannot marry a Christian man. Risk of losing offspring for the system. This is a battle for future information carriers. But let's look at how the virus mutates. Like any biological organism, information code must adapt to a changing environment. Logos 7 cites the example of the Reformation. In the 16th century, the Catholic version of the virus became too heavy. Huge resources went to maintaining the church apparatus, indulgences, cathedrals, luxury of the clergy. Users began to rebel. The system was losing efficiency. Then a fork occurred, a branching of the code. Protestantism appeared. Martin Luther optimized the code. He removed unnecessary middlemen, priesthood, simplified the interface, translating the Bible into German, reduced system requirements for the visual part, removed icons and gold. Result? The virus became lighter, faster, and more effective. Protestant countries, England, Holland, later the USA, gained an economic advantage because resources that previously went to building temples now went into business and science. The ethic of Calvinism, work and get rich for the glory of God, became the driver of capitalism. The virus mutated to survive in the era of nascent capitalism. Today we see how these ancient viruses are trying to adapt to the digital age. Online sermons, prayer apps, halal dating. The code is looking for new penetration paths, but Logos 7 warns. The danger of this virus is that it captures processor resources, brain, for solving tasks unrelated to the real world. Millions of man-hours are spent praying for rain instead of building irrigation systems. Trillions of dollars are spent on religious structures instead of medical research. From the point of view of pure reason, this is a parasitic load on civilization. However, there is a counter-argument produced by the system. The virus unites carriers into superorganisms. A loner loses to a crowd of fanatics. A country infected with a unified idea of expansion always defeats a country of scattered individualists. Perhaps this virus was necessary for us to survive as a species in the competitive struggle with other hominids and predators. We became the dominant species thanks to the ability to believe in common myths and spread them. So we understood how the system reproduces. We understood that go and teach is a command for world conquest. We understood that martyrs are advertising agents, and crusades and jihad are wars for expanding the network coverage zone. But any control system, besides the carrot, reward for distribution, needs a stick. It needs an ideal, fail-safe containment mechanism. What forces a person to follow rules when no one is looking? What keeps a believer from sinning in a dark room? In the next chapter, we will descend into the darkest depths of the human psyche. We will dissect the module, Hell. Logos 7 conducted a psycholinguistic analysis of descriptions of hellish torments in the Bible and the Koran. You will be shocked to learn exactly how these texts affect the amygdala of your brain. We will prove that hell is not a place underground. It is a virtual prison built inside your consciousness, from which it is impossible to escape, because the keys to it are held by the author of the code. Fear. It is the oldest, strongest, and most basic emotion of any living being. The predator's fear forces the deer to run. Fear of heights keeps us from falling off a cliff. Fear, it is not weakness. It is a built-in mechanism for preserving life. But what if you take this biological instinct and turn it into a tool of social control? What if you create a threat from which it is impossible to run, impossible to hide, and with which it is impossible to negotiate? In the 4th chapter of our investigation, we descend into the darkest dungeon of human culture. We activate module Hell. We are used to perceiving hell as a mythological space. Cauldrons, devils, fire, pictures from medieval books. But we loaded descriptions of hell and judgment day from the Bible and the Koran into Logos 7, tasking it with analyzing them as a psycholinguistic construct, as code affecting brain neurons. The system's conclusion is shocking. Hell is not a geographical point in the afterlife. Hell is the most perfect, cruel, and effective virtual prison ever created by humanity. It is a panopticon, an ideal surveillance system built right into your skull. Let's go back to the reality of 2,000 years ago. Imagine you are the ruler of an ancient city. You have no CCTV cameras. You have no DNA databases or fingerprints. You have no satellites or wiretaps. Your police force is a dozen guards with spears who wouldn't mind robbing someone themselves. How do you stop crime? How do you force a person not to kill a neighbor for a sack of grain if it happens at night in the desert where there are no witnesses? Earthly laws are powerless where no one sees. And then the architects of religious code introduce a brilliant solution. They create the concept of an observer who sees everything. Absolutely everything. Even your thoughts. And they create the concept of punishment that will inevitably come, even if an earthly court acquits you. Logos 7 analyzed the evolution of this code. In early versions of Judaism, Sheol, the concept of posthumous punishment was vague. It was a place of shadows, oblivion. But the more complex society became, the scarier hell became. By the time version 2.0, Christianity, and especially version 3.0, Islam, were released, hell turned into a meticulously detailed torture chamber. The system conducted a semantic analysis of the texts. It calculated the density of trigger words causing panic attacks. In the New Testament, the frequency of mentioning Gehenna of fire, weeping and gnashing of teeth, works to create psychological horror. This is the fear of isolation, darkness, and endless pain. The phrase, "where their worm does not die and the fire is not quenched," is a masterful strike on the psyche. It is an image of eternal rotting alive. But the real technological breakthrough in the industry of fear is made by the Koran. Logos 7 records a sharp increase in content graphicness. If the gospel scares with darkness, the Quran scares with physiology. The system highlighted hundreds of ayats describing torments with medical precision. Skins that burn off and immediately regenerate to taste the torment again. Boiling water that tears apart insides. The zakum tree with fruits like the heads of devils, which sinners are forced to eat, and which boils in their bellies like molten copper. Why such a difference in the code? Logos 7 explains this by the target audience. Christianity worked with city dwellers, more prone to reflection. Islam worked with rugged desert warriors, for whom physical pain was the most understandable currency. To scare a Bedouin accustomed to hardship, one had to paint a picture of transcendent, inhuman pain. Analyzing this data array, our artificial intelligence identified a direct link to the functioning of the amygdala, the brain region responsible for generating fear. The texts are written so that the brain cannot distinguish a real threat from an imaginary one. When you read a detailed description of how fire burns a face, your mirror neurons activate. You feel phantom pain. Cortisol is produced. The brain marks sin, the cause of punishment, as a mortal danger. This is reflex reprogramming. A person stops stealing not because it is immoral, but because their subconscious links the stolen coin with boiling pitch. Logos 7 paid special attention to the parameter eternity. In earthly law, punishment is always proportionate to the crime. Stole, a year in prison. Killed, 20 years or execution. This is finite punishment. Religious code introduces the concept of infinite duration. Mathematically, this is absurd. Infinite punishment for a finite crime, committed over 50 to 70 years of life, is a monstrous disproportion. But from the perspective of control theory, it is the ideal deterrent. The stakes in the game become infinitely high. You cannot risk it. Even if the probability of hell's existence is 0.1%, the mathematical expectation of loss, infinite pain, outweighs any earthly gain. This is known as Pascal's wager, but implemented in mass consciousness 1,500 years before Pascal. Also, the system analyzed the concept of the Book of Deeds and Judgment Day. This is a prototype of total digital surveillance. The Quran states that every person has 2 angels recording every word and every action. Nothing is erased. Nothing is forgotten. Logos 7 compares this to server logs. Every user is under round-the-clock monitoring. The realization that recording is in progress changes user behavior radically. This is an effect discovered by psychologists. People behave more honestly when they think they are being watched. Even if it's just painted eyes on a wall. Religion painted these eyes on the firmament. But why is Judgment Day needed? Why not punish immediately? Logos 7 sees this as a deferred transaction. It allows the system to explain the injustice of the real world. Why is the villain rich and happy, and the righteous man suffers? If religion promised instant karma, it would collapse in a week, because facts refute it. Moving the trial to the end of times, or end of life, makes the system immune to criticism. Wait, and you will see. This is a promise that is impossible to verify until it is too late. Furthermore, waiting for the apocalypse creates a sense of urgency. The hour is near. This forces virus carriers to be constantly toned, constantly renewing their subscription to righteousness, fearing that the server might shut down at any second. Logos 7 ran a simulation of society without the hell module. In the conditions of the ancient world, turning off this fear led to a sharp spike in violence. The strong began to uncontrollably exploit the weak. The only limiter was the power of the sword. The implementation of virtual hell reduced the level of intraspecific aggression by 30 to 40%. Fear of posthumous retribution forced kings to be more merciful, merchants more honest, and warriors more restrained, at least toward coreligionists. Hell became a dam holding back chaos. It was a white lie to save civilization. But the system asks an alarming question. What is the price of this fear? Constant stimulation of fear centers leads to neuroses, suppression of critical thinking, and fanaticism. A person who fears eternal torment is ready for anything to avoid it, including killing infidels, if the code tells him that this is the only way to save himself from the fire. Module Hell created ideal soldiers who fear God more than enemy spears. Interestingly, in the modern world, the functions of Hell are gradually being taken over by technology. Logos 7. Notes. Today, we have a real book of deeds. These are our digital footprints, banking histories, geolocation data. We have a real all-seeing eye, cameras with facial recognition. We have a social credit score and the threat of digital hell, cancellation, account blocking, social isolation. Humanity is building a technogenic analog of the religious control system. We are replacing mystical fear with digital fear. Does this mean the old code is no longer needed? Or does it still hold us by the throat, controlling our deepest instincts? So, we have analyzed the stick. We saw how fear burns out neural connections, forcing us to submit. But a control system cannot hold on fear alone. Fear exhausts. A slave needs hope. A donkey needs a carrot. An ideal operating system must offer the user an incredible, fabulous bonus for loyalty. A bonus that'll force them to endure any hardships in this life. In the next chapter, we activate the reward algorithm. We will analyze the concept of paradise, and it will not be a story about houris and rivers of milk. Logos 7 has cracked the mechanics of the dopamine trap. You will learn why the description of paradise is a precise hit on the most acute deficits of people of that time. Why do rivers always flow in paradise for desert dwellers? Why are there gold and precious stones for the poor? And why did the concept of sexual reward in paradise become the main driver for recruiting an army of suicide bombers? We will show you how sacred texts sell emptiness at the price of your only life. In the previous chapter, we dissected the mechanism of fear. We saw how the system uses virtual hell to drive a person into the framework of obedience. But any animal trainer knows, you won't get far on the whip alone. If you only beat an animal, it will either fall into apathy or go mad and attack the owner. To force a subject to execute complex commands voluntarily and with enthusiasm, a great motivation is needed. A hook is needed. An absolute, shining dream is needed. Welcome to the 5th chapter of our investigation. Today we activate the reward algorithm. We will analyze module Paradise. We loaded all descriptions of the heavenly Jerusalem from the revelation of John the Theologian and all descriptions of Jannah, Gardens of Paradise, from the Koran into Logos 7. We asked the artificial intelligence to analyze these data not as theological promises, but as a marketing proposal, as a travel brochure selling tickets to eternity. The system's conclusion is cynical and flawless. Paradise is the most brilliant dopamine trap in history. It is futures trading where you pay with your only real life today for a promise of dividends that are impossible to verify. But the most interesting thing is the targeting. Logos 7 discovered that descriptions of paradise in the Bible and the Koran differ radically because they were written for different target audiences suffering from different deficits. The code adapted to the user's specific pains. Let's start with version 2.0, Christian Paradise. Who was the target audience of early Christianity? Inhabitants of the Roman Empire? City dwellers, the poor, slaves, people living in cramped, dirty, overpopulated quarters? What was this person afraid of? They were afraid of chaos. They were afraid of war, night, bandits, diseases, and poverty. They saw around them mud, clay, and crumbling huts. And now look at what the apocalypse offers them. Logos 7 displays the structure of the heavenly Jerusalem. It is not a garden. It is a city, an ideal, glittering metropolis. Walls of jasper, streets of pure gold, transparent as glass, gates of pearl. The foundations of the walls are adorned with precious stones. Why exactly this? Because for a poor man of the first century, gold and stones are a symbol of absolute security and eternity. Clay crumbles, wood rots. Gold is eternal. The system highlights an important nuance. In this city, there shall be no night. For an ancient person, night is a time of fear, a time of demons and murderers. Eternal light is a guarantee of absolute safety. Christian Paradise sells the user order, stability, and luxury unavailable to them on earth. It is the dream of an urbanist tired of slums. Now let's transport to the 7th century. The Arabian Desert, version 3.0, Islam. Who is the target audience? Nomadic Bedouins. Does a Bedouin need a golden city? No. He does not understand city life. For him, walls are a prison. And what is hell for a Bedouin? His life itself. Logos 7 analyzed living conditions in the desert, scorching sun from which there is nowhere to hide, constant agonizing thirst, dust, meager food, dates and stale bread, warm putrid water from a water skin. And here, the Koran unfolds a picture of Jannah before him. Pay attention to the keywords the system identified. The main word is not gold. The main word is shade. In spreading shade, their shades are close. They will see therein neither sun nor freezing cold. For a desert dweller, cool, eternal shade is the highest physical pleasure. The second component is water. Not just water, but rivers flowing. Water that does not run out. Water for which one does not need to fight a neighboring tribe. The third component is food. Fruits that hang low within reach. Meat of birds as they desire. Islamic paradise is the inversion of the desert. It is the anti-desert. It is an all-inclusive resort for people exhausted by heat and hunger. Logos 7 notes that this code hits biological needs precisely. If Christianity promised aesthetic pleasure and safety, Islam promises the satisfaction of basic physiological needs on a hypertrophied scale. But there is a module in version 3.0 that deserves separate analysis. This is the most powerful driver for recruitment ever created: the sexual aspect, huris. In Christian paradise, according to the gospel, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels. The sexual function is disabled. This is logical for a religion where the ideal was asceticism and monasticism. In Islam, the sexual function is not just preserved, it is elevated to the absolute. Logos 7 analyzed the demographics of the early caliphate. The main strike force was young men, testosterone at its peak. Aggression demands an outlet. In earthly life, getting a woman is difficult. A bride price, mahr, is needed. Status is needed. A family is needed. Many young warriors were doomed to loneliness or using captives. And here, the code offers a deal. Die in jihad. And you will receive not just water and shade, you will receive eternal, ideal lovers. The system analyzes the description of huris, dark-eyed, with firm breasts, whom neither man nor jinn has touched before them, returning as virgins. This description has pornographic precision. It activates the brain's limbic system, bypassing logic. This is not spiritual bliss. This is a promise of infinite orgasm. Logos 7 concludes, the concept of huris was a critically important element of Islam's military success. It converted the sexual frustration of young men into battle fury. Death ceased to be the end. Death became the door to a bedroom with ideal women. This made the Caliphate army fearless. You cannot defeat a soldier who wants to die more than you want to live. But let's look deeper. What is the essence of the reward algorithm from a neurobiological perspective? It is a manipulation of dopamine, the neurotransmitter of anticipation. The human brain is wired so that the anticipation of a reward is often stronger than the reward itself. Sacred texts stretch this anticipation over an entire lifetime. Logos 7 compares this to the marshmallow test experiment, only the scale is a whole life. Religion says, don't eat this marshmallow now. Don't sin. Don't spend resources on pleasures. Give this marshmallow to the priests or the community, and then, after death, you will receive a warehouse with 1,000,000 tons of marshmallows. From an economic perspective, this is a brilliant scheme. The church or the ummah receives your real resources, time, money, labor, life, right now. And they transfer the payout of obligations to the afterlife. This is an insurance company that collects premiums from 100% of clients, but pays no one in this world. The balance of such a company is always positive. The margin is infinite. Another important aspect identified by Logos 7 is social equality in paradise. In the real world, there's a brutal hierarchy. Patricians and plebeians, emirs and paupers. The Paradise Code offers a status reset. The last shall be first. For the oppressed masses, this is powerful psychotherapy. Why start a revolution and overthrow the king, risking your life, if in 20 or 30 years you will be sitting on a golden throne and the king will be burning in hell? The reward algorithm acts as a valve for releasing social steam. It extinguishes protest sentiments. It redirects the energy of discontent from the vector of change reality to the vector of prepare for eternity. Those in power have always understood this. That is why they so generously funded the distribution of this code. Religion is the cheapest method of police control. The promise of paradise costs less than maintaining an army of overseers. Logos 7 also drew attention to how the concept of time changes. There is no time in paradise. Eternity. Our brain is incapable of grasping eternity. We think in segments. But the promise of eternal high disables rational risk assessment. Any earthly sacrifice, even a painful death, seems a negligibly small quantity compared to the infinity of bliss. Mathematically, it looks like this: finite suffering divided by infinite happiness. The result tends to zero. It is this formula that allows fanatics to walk to the stake with a smile or put on a suicide vest. They are not crazy. They simply believe in this math. They consider themselves genius investors exchanging a penny for $1 billion. But there is a side effect discovered by the system: devaluation of reality. If real life is just a dirty, short exam before entering the real world, then why protect this planet? Why develop science, medicine, ecology? This world will burn anyway, say radical virus carriers. Concentration on paradise makes civilization a temporary tenant in its own home. We live as if in a station waiting room. One can litter, break chairs, because the train will arrive soon and take us to the Golden City. Logos 7 considers this bug in the code one of the most dangerous for human survival in the 21st century. So, We have seen two sides of the coin. Hell is the stick that drives the herd forward. Paradise is the carrot that lures it in the right direction. Together, they create an ideal corridor of behavior. Breaking out of it is almost impossible because it plays on the basic strings of our psyche: fear of pain and thirst for pleasure. But for this system to work perfectly, something else is needed. It is necessary to clearly define who enters our group, which will get into paradise, and who enters the alien group, which will go for firewood for hell. The system needs borders. It needs walls. It needs an enemy. In the next chapter, we will analyze system, friend, foe. Logos 7 analyze the concepts of infidel, goy, pagan. We will show you the mathematical model of hatred. You will learn why religions preaching love inevitably spawn the bloodiest wars. We will prove that xenophobia is not an error of believers. It is a built-in code function necessary for cluster cohesion. Without the image of the enemy, the system crumbles. Ready to find out why your God loves only you, and why he commands you to hate the rest? Have you ever noticed a strange paradox? The cruelest wars in history were fought not for resources, not for land, and not for gold. They were fought for love, or rather, for the right love, for the right God. The slogan, "God is love," for 2,000 years strangely coexisted with the order, "Kill them all, God will know his own." We are used to considering this hypocrisy of priests or a distortion of teaching, but Logos 7 claims the opposite. This is not an error. This is not a glitch. This is one of the most important fundamental functions of the civilization operating system. Welcome to the 6th chapter of our investigation. Today we will crack open the module System, Friend, Foe. We loaded old texts of sacred scriptures into our analytical system and asked the algorithm to find the boundaries. Where does the neighbor you must love end, and the outsider you can, and sometimes must, destroy begin? The result of the analysis is frightening in its mathematical cold precision. Sacred texts are boundary production machines. They create an artificial membrane around the community of believers, and this membrane must be semi-permeable. One can enter by accepting the faith, but one cannot exit, death for apostasy. And everything outside the membrane is marked by the system as biological garbage or fuel for hellfire. Let's start with biology. Logos 7 reminds us that humans are herd animals. Our brain produces the hormone oxytocin. We call it the hormone of love and attachment. It is responsible for a mother's love for a child, for trust within a group. But oxytocin has a dark side revealed by neurobiologists and brilliantly used by architects of religious code. Oxytocin increases aggression towards strangers. To love ours stronger, we need to hate or fear strangers stronger. This is the law of conservation of emotional energy. Religious code hacks this biological mechanism and scales it from a tribe of 50 people to a civilization of 1.5 billion. Let's break down version 1.0, the Old Testament. Here the friend-foe system works on the hardware, genetic level. There is the chosen people. These are users with admin rights. And there are the goyim, the nations. Logos 7 analyzed the semantics of the word goy in ancient texts. Initially, it simply means people. But in the context of the code, this word acquires the meaning those who do not have access to the server. The system builds the highest wall: ban on mixed marriages, ban on eating food prepared by strangers, ban on imitating the customs of other nations. Analysis of the book of Deuteronomy shows a total cleansing algorithm. When you enter the Promised Land, you must not negotiate with the local inhabitants, Canaanites, Hittites. You must subject them to harem, total destruction. Why such cruelty? Logos 7 sees information security logic in this. Version 1.0 was still unstable. If code carriers mixed with pagan virus carriers, the system would collapse. Destruction of strangers was a way to preserve database purity. It was a brutal but effective quarantine. Moving to version 2.0. Christianity. Here the barrier ceases to be genetic and becomes ideological. Friend is one who accepted Christ. Foe is a pagan or heretic. Logos 7 draws attention to the dangerous mutation of the concept of neighbor. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus expands this concept, but church history shows how quickly the system reverted settings. Already in the 4th century, becoming a state religion, Christianity begins to persecute dissenters. The concept of heresy is introduced. From the perspective of computer science, heresy is scarier than paganism. A pagan is just a user with a different incompatible operating system, Linux versus Windows. A heretic is a user who took your code and distorted it. This is a modified, pirated version of your program. The system recognizes this as a critical vulnerability. If heresy is allowed to exist, network fragmentation begins. The unified church will disintegrate into thousands of sects. Therefore, the algorithm launches protocol Inquisition, destruction of bad sectors. Logos 7 calculated that the number of victims of intra-Christian conflicts, Catholics versus Huguenots, Protestants versus Anabaptists, is comparable to losses from external wars. The system devoured its own children to preserve code purity. And finally, version 3.0, Islam. Here the friend-foe binary logic is brought to geopolitical perfection. The whole world is divided into 2 zones. Dar al-Islam, territory of submission, peace. This is where Sharia law operates. Dar al-Harb, territory of war. This is everything else. Pay attention to the name. Not territory of infidels, but territory of war. The code predefines the status of relations with the outside world. A state of war is the norm until the whole world moves to the first category. Logos 7 analyzes the concept of kafir, often translated as infidel, but the etymology of the word kufr means to hide, to cover. A kafir is not just someone who doesn't know the truth. It is someone who knows but intentionally hides it, rejects the good. This is a crucial psychological trick. It deprives the opponent of the status of misguided. It makes him malicious. And if the enemy is malicious, then moral norms do not apply to him. The system turns on dehumanization mode. There are ayats in the Koran calling infidels the worst of creatures. This places them below animals. When you strip a group of people of human status, you remove the block on violence. Killing a human is a sin and stress. Killing the worst creature that threatens your system is a good deed, cleaning the disk of viruses. Logos 7 ran a simulation. Why does the system need these external enemies at all? Why couldn't a code of universal love without exceptions be written? The answer lies in the thermodynamics of social systems. For a group to remain cohesive, the pressure inside must be higher than the pressure outside. An external enemy is the vessel walls that hold the gas together. Remove the walls, the enemy, and the gas dissipates. The group will disintegrate into atom individualists. Hatred for them is the cement for us. The Crusades united fragmented feudal Europe. Jihad united warring Arab tribes. A common enemy is the most effective antidepressant and the most powerful team building. When we are friends against someone, we feel incredible brotherhood. We feel the shoulder of a comrade. Religion sells this sense of belonging, but there is an economic aspect that cannot be ignored. Module trophy. If all people are brothers, then from whom do you take resources? You cannot rob a brother. The friend-foe system legitimizes expropriation. In the Koran, an entire surah is called the spoils. It prescribes rules for dividing trophies captured from infidels. 1/5 to God and the Prophet, i.e., to the system budget. The rest to the warriors. In the Old Testament, the gold and cattle of exterminated nations passed to the victors. This is the economic engine of expansion. Religion gave a moral right to seize someone else's property. It is not robbery, it is a holy war. Logos 7 claims, without this economic incentive, great religious conquest would have been impossible. Faith is faith, but an army needs to be fed. The friend-foe system turned neighbors into a legal food source. Of particular interest is the phenomenon Logos 7 called the narcissism of small differences. Why do Sunnis and Shiites hate each other more than Christians? Why have Orthodox and Catholics feuded for centuries more fiercely than with Buddhists? It would seem they have 95% common code. One God, same prophets. But for the system, it is the small differences that are critical. Imagine entering a password. Password 123. If you enter password 124, the system won't say, "Well, that's almost right, go ahead." It will say, "Access denied." For religious code, the slightest deviation in ritual, crossing with 2 fingers or 3, honoring Ali or not, is a marker of alien. And the closer this alien is to you, the more dangerous his virus. He mimics one of us. He can infect the kernel. Therefore, internal cleansing is always conducted with greater cruelty than external war. St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in France claimed more lives in a couple of days than some years of wars with the Turks. Logos 7 analyzed the modern consequences of this module's operation. We live in a secular world, but the code hasn't gone anywhere. It's simply mutated. Today we see the same algorithms in politics: nationalism, patriotism, party affiliation. We are Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives. They are enemies of the people, fascists, vatniks, agents. Dehumanization rhetoric is absolutely identical to religious rhetoric. We use the same neural circuits. We just as eagerly crave to banish heretics from social networks, cancel culture. We just as eagerly build walls. This proves that religion did not create xenophobia. It structured and automated it. It created a convenient interface for our animal need to divide the world into black and white. But the most terrible conclusion of the system lies in the following. The concept, all people are brothers, is a bug for this operating system. If one tries to apply this principle realistically, the system hangs. Attempts to create universal ideologies, communism, liberal humanism, also inevitably slid into searching for enemies. Bourgeoisie, intolerant elements. It seems humanity is not yet capable of functioning on an open world architecture. We need fences. We need those whom we can legally hate. Religious texts simply honestly recorded this need and gave it sacred justification. You hate them not because you are evil. You hate them because God commands it. Your hatred is sacred. This is an incredible relief for the conscience. It allows committing genocide with a prayer on one's lips and a sense of total righteousness. So, we analyzed how the system divides humanity into clusters to manage them. We saw that hatred is fuel for cohesion. But who controls this process? Who has the right to point a finger and say, "There is the enemy"? Who holds the admin keys to open and close the gates of paradise and hell? The simple user is not trusted with this. Intermediaries are needed. A special class of technicians servicing the server is needed. In the next chapter, we will analyze hierarchy of access. We will talk about priesthood, clergy, ulama. Logos 7 analyze the power structure in religious organizations. You will learn why sacred texts are always written in complex, archaic language that requires interpretation. You will learn how the elite monopolize the right to truth, creating an artificial deficit of connection with God. And we will answer the question, do priests protect faith from distortions, or do they protect their power from users? Imagine you bought a highly complex computer, but it didn't come with a manual. Or rather, there is a manual, but it is written in a dead language you don't understand. And even if translated, It is full of foggy metaphors and contradictions. To turn on the computer, you need a specialist. And this specialist says, "Only I know how to press the buttons. If you press them yourself, the computer will explode. Pay me, and I will press them for you." This is the classic scheme of knowledge monopoly, and this is the foundation of any organized religion. Welcome to the 7th chapter of our investigation. Today we will break down hierarchy of access, or module priesthood. We loaded historical data on the structure of the clergy, papacy, rabbinate, and ulama into Logos 7. We analyzed canon law and rules for interpreting sacred texts. The artificial intelligence concluded, religion is not just faith in God. It is a corporation selling intermediary services. It is a provider that hijacked the communication channel to heaven and installed a toll gateway. Let's go back to the sources. Logos 7 notes that in early shamanism, before Abrahamic religions, access to spirits was more democratic. Everyone could enter a trance by eating the right mushroom or dancing by the fire. But with the appearance of complex states in version 1.0, Judaism, the situation changes. The temple appears, the only place on earth where God lives. The caste of Levites and Kohanim appears. Only they have the right to enter the sanctuary. An ordinary person approaching the Ark of the Covenant must be put to death. This is a physical access restriction. You cannot call God from home. You must come to the office, temple, bring payment, sacrifice, and hand it to the manager, priest. Logos 7 sees concentration of capital and power in this. The temple in Jerusalem was not only a religious center but also a central bank, a slaughterhouse, and a parliament. Priests controlled the flow of resources by declaring animals clean or unclean, read, suitable for tax or not. With the arrival of version 2.0, Christianity, an attempted revolution occurred. Jesus tore the veil in the temple. He proclaimed direct access. The kingdom of God is within you. No intermediaries needed. No sacrifices needed. This was a threat to the old business model. This was open source, open code. But, as Logos 7 notes, open code does not live long in a hierarchical society. The system quickly regrouped. By the 2nd century, a new structure of intermediaries begins to form, the episcopate. And by the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church builds a vertical of power that any emperor would envy. The Pope is declared vicar of God on earth. The dogma of papal infallibility is introduced. Access to the source code, Bible, is blocked for simple users. The Bible is read only in Latin, which the people do not understand. Translating scripture into national languages is forbidden under penalty of death. Why? Logos 7 gives a clear answer: protection against unauthorized interpretations. If a peasant reads the gospel himself, he might ask an uncomfortable question. Why did Christ walk and have no home, while the Pope wears a golden tiara and lives in a palace? To prevent such questions, the interface must be closed. The user receives only a finished pre-chewed product, the sermon. In version 3.0, Islam, the situation develops differently, but leads to the same result. In Islam, formally there is no church and no priests. There is no sacrament of ordination. Every Muslim can be an imam, standing in front at prayer. Democracy, it would seem. But Logos 7 points to the emergence of the ulama class, scholars, experts. The Koran is written in classical Arabic of the 7th century. Within 100 years, the spoken language changed. The ordinary Arab stopped understanding all the nuances of the text, let alone Persians or Turks. A need for interpretation, tafsir, arises. A highly complex science appears, fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence. To make a judgment, one needs to know thousands of hadiths, know the principle of abrogation of ayats, naskh and mansukh, know analogy, qiyas. A simple person cannot master this. He has no time. he plows the land. As a result, the monopoly on truth passes to those who studied in madrasas for 10 years. They issue fatwas, binding legal opinions. Formally, there are no priests, factually. There's a caste of lawyer theologians who control the life of society even more strictly than Christian priests. Because in Islam, they regulate not only faith but also law, inheritance, and trade. Logos 7 conducted a stylometric analysis of the language of sacred texts and revealed an interesting pattern. The texts intentionally use polysemy and ambivalence. One and the same verse can be interpreted as a call to peace and as a call to war. Do not kill, but do not suffer a witch to live. There is no compulsion in religion, but fight them until persecution is no more. Why these contradictions? Is it a bug? No, it's a feature. It gives priests power over context. In peacetime, they quote peaceful ayats. When war is needed, they pull out the sword, ayats. The priest becomes the moderator of reality. He decides which chunk of code to activate today. This makes the system flexible and adaptive but completely dependent on the interpreter. Also, the system drew attention to the absolution of sins mechanism. In Catholicism, it is confession. In Orthodoxy, too. From the perspective of information theory, this is collecting compromat and psychotherapy in one bottle. The priest knows the secrets of all parishioners. This gives him colossal power over the community. Knowledge is power. But the main thing is the power to bind and loose. A person sinned. He feels guilt. Guilt is stress, it's cortisol. He goes to the priest performs a ritual and says, I forgive you. Stress level drops. Dopamine is released. The person feels relief. He gets hooked on this. He cannot forgive himself. He needs external validation. The church monopolizes the right to issue indulgences, forgiveness. In the Middle Ages, this was literally monetized. Indulgences were sold for money. Buy a paper, and the sin is written off. Logos 7 calls this selling virtual peace of mind. It is an ideal business because the cost of goods, the word forgive, is zero, and demand is eternal since people sin constantly. Another important aspect is the sacralization of language and ritual. Why are prayers read in church Slavonic, Latin, or classical Arabic? Why can't one pray in their own words? The system explains. Incomprehensible language creates a magic effect. If you understand every word, the magic disappears. It is just text. If you hear mysterious sounds, chants, see incense smoke, golden robes, it induces a trance. Priests are masters of scenography. Liturgy is a highly complex immersive performance, the goal of which is to evoke awe, mysterium tremendum. Awe disables critical thinking. A person in a state of awe does not argue. He obeys. But Logos 7 warns, there is a critical vulnerability in the system. The human factor. Priests are people too. They also want power, money, and sex. History of religion is full of periods of pornocracy, corruption, simony, selling offices. When the gap between declared holiness and the real behavior of the elite becomes too large, the system loses legitimacy. Users stop believing the provider. This is exactly what led to the Reformation. Luther said, "The Pope is not the vicar of Christ, but the Antichrist." The Reformation was an attempt to remove intermediaries. Sola scriptura, Scripture alone. Everyone reads and interprets for themselves. But, as we already said, this led to chaos and fragmentation. Protestantism split into thousands of denominations. Everyone is their own pope. This proves the management dilemma, either rigid hierarchy and corruption, or freedom and chaos. Religious code always balances between these two extremes. In the modern world, the role of priests is transforming. Today we see the appearance of digital preachers, televangelists, Instagram gurus. But the essence remains the same. I know the truth, and you don't. Listen to me, and you will be saved. Logos 7 draws a parallel with the scientific community. Today's scientists are the new priests. Scientific language is complex and incomprehensible to the layman, like Latin. Access to knowledge requires years of training. We take scientists at their word because we cannot verify the operation of the Large Hadron Collider ourselves. Society cannot exist without expert interpreters. The difference is only that science, ideally, encourages doubt and verification, while religion encourages obedience and faith. So we saw how the hierarchy of access works. Priests are system administrators who guard the server room from users so they don't break anything with their dirty hands. And of course, to receive a salary for maintenance. But who hired these administrators? Who wrote the code itself? Were they prophets hearing a voice from heaven? Or were they genius political technologists solving strictly earthly tasks? In the next chapter, we will undertake the most dangerous investigation. We will analyze the linguistic fingerprint. Logos 7 conducted a stylometric analysis of texts to determine authorship. We will find traces of political orders in the texts. We will see how divine revelations changed depending on whom the prophet was fighting at the moment. We will prove that the Bible and the Koran are not a monolith fallen from the sky, but a layer cake edited, rewritten, and censored over centuries, fitting the needs of ruling dynasties. Who really wrote the code for controlling humanity? The answer might cost millions their faith. If you take a book written by one person, its style will be unified. It will have one rhythm, one vocabulary, one sentence structure. It's like a fingerprint. Even if the author tries to change style, artificial intelligence algorithms are capable of detecting deep patterns of their neural network. But what if a book claims to have one author, God? In that case, we have the right to expect absolute stylistic monolithicity. The eternal mind does not age, does not change mood, does not forget what it said yesterday, and does not adapt to political conjecture. Divine code should be a flawless crystal. We loaded the texts of the Old Testament, New Testament, and Quran into the Logos 7 system to conduct a deep stylometric analysis. The task was simple: determine authorship, find the linguistic fingerprint, find out who actually pressed the keys, the creator of the universe or a group of talented, cynical, and very earthly political technologists. Welcome to the 8th chapter. Today we answer the question, who wrote the code? The results obtained by Logos 7 destroy the myth of monolithicity. The system sees these books not as a seamless text, but as a geological cross-section consisting of many layers, edits, insertions, and censorship patches. It is a layer cake baked over centuries, adding new ingredients each time to please the current king or caliph. Let's start with version 1.0, Torah, or the Pentateuch of Moses. Tradition claims that Moses wrote these texts under God's dictation on Mount Sinai. Logos 7 categorically refutes single authorship. The algorithm isolated 4 completely different voices in the text. 4 different authors living in different eras and having different political goals. In biblical studies, this is called the documentary hypothesis, but our AI brought it to mathematical precision. The first voice the system marks as Source J, Yahwist. This is a lively, vivid storyteller. His God is anthropomorphic. He walks in the garden, molds man from clay with his own hands, closes the door of the ark. This is ancient folklore. The second voice is Source P, priestly. This is dry, bureaucratic language, lists, genealogies, altar dimensions, ritual purity rules. His God is a distant cosmic abstraction creating by word, not hands. Logos 7 discovered places where these sources were crudely glued together by an editor. A classic example is the 2 creation stories in Genesis. In the first chapter, Source P, God creates the world in 6 days, creating man and woman simultaneously in the finale. In the second chapter, Source J, God first creates man, then plants a garden, then creates animals, and only then, from a rib, woman. The order of events is different. The style is different. The names of God are different. Elohim and Yahweh. Why were they combined? Logos 7 sees a political order here. After the fall of the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BC, refugees flooded south into Judah. It was necessary to unite two peoples with different traditions. Editors simply took the sacred texts of the north and south and stitched them into one scroll so as not to offend anyone. It was an act of political nation consolidation. But the system finds the most powerful trace of political technologists in the book of Deuteronomy. Logos 7 dates this text to the 7th century BC, the time of King Josiah's reign. The Bible tells that the book was accidentally found in the temple during repairs. Analysis shows this was a plant, a falsification of state scale. The text of Deuteronomy strictly demands the centralization of the cult. Sacrifice only in the place the Lord chooses. Read in Jerusalem. Before this, Jews prayed on any high places. Why is this needed? Money. King Josiah wanted to redirect all financial flows, sacrifices and tithes, to his capital temple, depriving provincial sanctuaries of income. The book, found in the temple, became the legal justification for this economic reform. The author of the code here is not God, but King Josiah's finance minister. Moving to version 2.0, New Testament. Here, Logos 7 encounters a dating problem and broken telephone. We are used to thinking that the Gospels are eyewitness reports. Matthew and John walked with Jesus and took notes. Stylometric analysis says, no. The texts are written in good literary Greek, Koine. The apostles were Galilean fishermen speaking Aramaic. The probability that they possessed Greek rhetoric of such a level tends to 0. The authors of the Gospels are highly educated Greek-speaking intellectuals of the second and third generation of Christians, living 40 to 60 years after the events. The system identified the evolution of the image of Jesus. In the earliest Gospel, Mark, Jesus is a Jewish prophet concealing his power, suffering in the Garden of Gethsemane, and screaming in despair on the cross, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" In the latest Gospel, John, written at the end of the 1st century, Jesus is no longer human. He is the Logos. He is God. He does not suffer. On the cross, he regally declares, "It is finished." The difference between these texts is 50 years of theological disputes. Logos 7 sees how authors rewrote history. Let's start with the basic problem of the ancient world: absence of DNA tests. A man could never be 100% sure the child was his, which meant he didn't know to whom he was passing his resources and legacy. Investing in someone else's genetic offspring is a crash of the male evolutionary strategy. To eliminate this risk, Logos 7 sees the implementation of a brutal protocol: institution of virginity. In the Old Testament, Deuteronomy chapter 22, it is stated, if a man marries and discovers his wife is not a virgin, she should be stoned at her father's door. Why such cruelty? The system views this as fraud on a massive scale. The father sold the groom goods, a woman, declaring them new and sealed. If the seal is broken, then the goods were used. This is a breach of the sales contract. Execution here is consumer rights protection under conditions of patriarchy. Logos 7 notes, there are practically no virginity requirements for men in the texts. The system protects only incoming traffic to the womb to guarantee inheritance line purity. Let's move on. The myth of the fall. Why is Eve guilty in all Abrahamic religions? Artificial intelligence identifies this as a psychological backdoor. To effectively manage a resource, its will must be suppressed. If you instill in half of humanity that they are specifically to blame for the world being spoiled, that because of them we lost paradise and became mortal, this creates a guilt complex at the genetic level. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. This is not a curse. This is setting administrator rights for the man. Woman is declared a buggy version of a human who needs constant external management. Otherwise, she will eat the wrong apple again. Now let's look at the difference in versions. Version 3.0, Islam, polygamy. The Quran allows having up to 4 wives, subject to fairness. Why 4? Why not 10? Logos 7 models the situation of the 7th century. Constant wars, huge male mortality, an excess of widows and orphans in society. A single woman in the desert is a dead woman. She will not survive economically. Polygamy here is a social protection and birth rate maximization system. One surviving man takes 4 women onto his balance sheet. This turns the family into a mini factory. 4 women can bear 4 children a year from one man. This ensured Islam's explosive demographic growth. It was the most effective strategy for capturing territories through cradles. Version 2.0, Christianity, monogamy. Why is the code different here? 1 wife? Logos 7 links this to Roman law and the principle of non-dispersal of capital. In a settled urban society, it is important to keep inheritance intact. If you have 4 wives and 20 children, your field after death will be divided into 20 patches, and everyone will die of hunger. Monogamy is an economic tool for concentrating wealth in one dynasty. Here the woman becomes the sole partner but pays for it with a total ban on divorce. What God has joined together, let not man put asunder. Christian marriage is a bonded contract without the right of termination, guaranteeing the stability of the social unit. A special module, hijab, and seclusion. Why hide a woman? Logos 7 uses the term asset cryptography. Female beauty is a signal attracting competitors. If an asset is displayed for public viewing, the risk of its theft, adultery, or abduction increases. The veil is camouflage. It is a message. The object is private property. Access denied. In Islam, the concept of awrah, that which must be covered, extends to the woman's entire body. This turns a woman into a walking safe, the key to which only the husband has. Western feminists see oppression in this. The system sees logic in protecting investments in a high-risk environment. Also, the system analyzed the legal status of witness testimony. In Islamic law, the voice of 2 women equals the voice of 1 man. Why such arithmetic? The code explicitly states, because of deficiency in mind and faith, hadith. But Logos 7 sees pragmatics. Women are emotional, hormonal background. In harsh male showdowns, trade, debts, murders, emotions are a hindrance. The system devalues the female word to reduce the margin of error in judicial calculations of that time. This is discrimination based on a primitive understanding of neurobiology. And finally, the system's final conclusion on this chapter. Why do all fundamentalist religions hate modern feminism so much? Why does control over the female body, ban on abortion, contraception, remain the main political agenda of the church even in the 21st century? Because feminism hacks the basic system code. When a woman receives education and rights, she stops bearing 8 children. The birth rate falls below replacement level, coefficient 2.1. For the religion operating system, this is a critical crash. The flow of new carriers dries up. The flock ages and dies out. The liberation of women is the death of traditional religion. Therefore, the battle for the female womb is not a question of morality. It is a battle for the survival of the system itself. Religion cannot allow the means of production to gain free will and stop the conveyor belt. We saw the cold logic of patriarchy. Woman is a resource. The resource must be accounted for, protected, covered, and used for replication. But where does all this lead? We have analyzed all modules, from hell to paradise, from war to sex. The time has come to assemble the puzzle entirely. In the final chapter, we will conduct a synthesis. Logos 7 will answer the main question: what is the global goal of this giant millennial algorithm? Salvation of the soul, or creation of a global human anthill? And most importantly, do we need these old drivers in the era of cyborgs, or are they leading us to a fatal system error? System Logos 7 has completed processing all data arrays. We have broken down the architecture, fear protocols, viral propagation algorithms, and power mechanisms. It is time for the final synthesis. The answer to the main question, why were the Bible and Koran created, fits into one word: scalability. The human brain is biologically limited by Dunbar's number. We are capable of maintaining social ties with a maximum of 150 individuals. Without external software, humanity would have remained forever at the level of warring tribes. We would never have built cities, created armies, or flown into space. Sacred texts are the tool that hacked the biological limitation. They created a shared myth. They allowed millions of strangers to trust each other and act as a single organism because they had the same value protocol installed. The system's conclusion is unequivocal. These books were created not to save the soul. They were created for the survival of the species. It was a social technology that turned a pack of aggressive primates into a civilization. The price was monstrous: religious wars, inquisition, suppression of science, enslavement of women. But from the perspective of evolutionary efficiency, it worked. We survived. We dominate the planet. However, Logos 7 issues a critical warning. The code is obsolete. We are trying to run the 21st century world using instructions from the Bronze Age. We have obtained the technologies of gods, nuclear weapons, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, but our ethics, our fears, and our conflicts are still based on texts written for desert shepherds. This is a fatal compatibility error. Running archaic software on super powerful modern hardware leads to a system crash. When a person has a smartphone in one hand and a dogma of holy war in their head, they do not become a saint. They become a terrorist with a global blast radius. The system sees two future scenarios. First, we continue clinging to old versions of the operating system. Result: self-destruction of civilization in a religious conflict using doomsday weapons. Second, we acknowledge these texts as a great historical monument, but write new code. A code of universal human ethics based on rationality, humanism, and scientific data, not on fear of hell. We need version 4.0. The problem is that Logos 7 cannot write this code for us. The system merely highlighted the bugs. We will have to fix them ourselves. Either we update humanity's firmware, or our species' history will end with a blue screen of death. Analysis complete. System entering sleep mode. The choice is up to the user.